Epic Loot Radio. Epic Loot Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Epic Loot Radio. Brian and Joyful Arcade, aka Mark, are here with you guys today. There's a lot to talk about. We've got console sale numbers, discussions. You've done a little financial research on some of the numbers and the growth year over year. This is, I think, going to be a fun little conversation because it's always been a question that has boggled my mind, being that the PS2 is still the premiere. And I get the DVD argument. I get that because I bought it not just for gaming, but that was my first DVD player. But we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about what we're playing. We're going to talk about the Game of the Year nominations, kind of our thoughts overall, what we think maybe should have been nominated, and all this stuff and more. I think that's going to be what you get in today's show. Mark, how are you? What are you playing? What's going on with your life, bud?
Well, hey, buddy, how you doing? I'm great. Life is busy. I mentioned earlier, my wife, we're going to be having our baby in 11 weeks now. So that's awesome. Work is solid and going strong. So, what am I playing? Right now, my life consists of helping my wife get comfortable at night as she struggles with the pains of pregnancy. And then after she passes out, I've been picking up my Switch and playing Star Ocean Second Story R.
How is that?
It's great. So I've never played a Star Ocean game before, and
Okay.
I was really attracted to when they announced it on I think a Switch Direct a couple months ago, or maybe half a year ago now. And it's apparently a pretty beloved franchise. It's been going for decades now. The remake itself is done fantastic. It looks beautiful, but the story and writing is what I find most impressive. I'm not one to really get into an RPG just for the writing.
Okay.
But I would tell you this, it has strong Star Trek vibes, which really surprised me. Like very epic story in that sense, but at the same time, it manages to still feel small and cozy as well. So combine that with, it's not turn-based action. It's more of like a Tales of Arise type of action system. I'm liking it. I'm liking it a lot. Like the story has me interested. And the few times my wife's heard me playing it, she's like, what is that? What? Because the voice acting's done really well. So it's been going good.
That actually is one of the things that I wasn't aware of, because like this has been on my radar. But when I start looking at my personal backlog, of which right now I'm trying to finish Final Fantasy 16. So I finished Starfield. I put my review up for Starfield, and then I was like, okay, what's my next single player game? And the temptation was like, go play Spider-Man or go play Final Fantasy 7 Remake, Brian. You haven't done those yet. And I'm like, I don't need more unfinished games in my life. But second, it's like, actually I've played many of the Star Ocean series and we're back on the PlayStation as well. So the fact that you're giving me that education that it's it's voice acted as well, that has me honestly very excited, because it's like, as actually honestly YouTube and kind of my schedule as a dad is fluctuating, I've been able to do like these 1 hour like lunchtime streams on occasion during the week, and then it's like, oh, I'm actually like making progress through these games. There is a future in which that, yes, I will be able to play Elden Ring and finish it. I will be able to play Second Story, Star Ocean Second Story R, and be able to actually finish it, which I think it would be worth my time. Octopath Traveler. Like it's weird. I don't know if you ever feel this way, but it's like the games that I'm most attracted to and enjoy are the ones that are like, yeah, you need more time and you have nothing to give. So you're going to just constantly like be way behind the eight ball. Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I still want to finish Xenoblade Chronicles because I've heard such great things about the story and how it finally pays off in Xenoblade 3's DLC. And it's just like, I'd love to do that. But that's hundreds of hours of gameplay. I tend to stick with the games I know I can complete. So I just finished Super Mario Brothers Wonder. Tears of the Kingdom, I went hard on at first, and then I took a little bit of a break and I finished that, and well worth it. But yeah, I have that same problem. Like I also started playing RoboCop Rogue City. Which, if you're a fan of the RoboCop movies, it captures that original essence perfectly in terms of just the comedy and satire, but also you feel like RoboCop. One of the best slow motion punch actions I've ever had in a game. It's brutal. But yeah, like it's impressive. Like this is actually bigger than I thought. I thought it'd be level by level, but it's an open world RPG. There's RPG mechanics. You could be RoboCop just helping people file police cases, and everything you do in terms of how you respond has an impact on your stats. So that's a game I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I'll do that over winter break. That might be a fantasy. Maybe when the baby comes, that's definitely a fantasy. So
Well, the thing
um,
about babies is they, especially like a lot of people worry about it, but it really isn't until they start walking around that you
yeah,
really like. There's certain things you do, but it's like you need to feed them, change them, spend play with them a little bit, but they're gonna sleep
yep.
ideally a lot. Like that's the hope. It's like because otherwise you're gonna be very tired and nothing will happen. We won't see you on the podcast for a couple of months at that point.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. I've had a lot of experience with my nephews and nieces where I know that's the case. But yeah, so come February, March, maybe I'll get a lot more gaming in as I take a little bit off work just to paternity leave. So, but yeah, diapers I can handle. I've been doing that for a long time. So
There you go, man. All right. So outside of that and what you're playing, let's shift into the kind of the console sales because
yeah,
this is something that's just been very interesting to me because we've seen, I think, exponential growth in terms of what it means to be a gamer. Right? Mobile gaming has played a huge role in getting more people playing video games, and the development of mobile, especially when you start seeing things like the iPhone 15 being able to run like Resident Evil 4 remake. You're like, okay, like these things are in a way like really competitive for people's time. And I think that's really what all this is competition for time.
mm,
And when it comes down to it, like the numbers people kind of spout are like there are 3 billion gamers worldwide. You have emerging markets like India, China, that not necessarily all have this history of consoles personally. But then when you go look at the numbers, it's like, well, if there are 3 billion gamers in the world, why haven't we seen something top the PS2? And so you've done some research into it. What have you found? What are your thoughts?
yeah, that's a great point to say it's about time because it really is a competition for how we choose to spend our leisure time with entertainment, whether it's gaming or watching, movies or TV shows. So you mentioned that on Twitter, and I was like, that is a good question. I had some ideas, and I just dug in initially, very briefly, on consoles sales between the fifth generation and the eighth generation, which again, there's reasons to argue if that's the best way to do it, but this is the cleanest way to compartmentalize this data. So fifth generation's PlayStation 1, N64, Saturn, Jaguar, and 3DO. Eighth generation's Wii U, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch, but the Wii U was kind of a failure. So, and then the ninth
Get it out of
generation,
here.
it's just not done yet. So it's hard to really look at that as anything for this conversation. But what I would say between the fifth and eighth generation, there was a growth rate of 119% in total consoles sold. So the biggest mark, though, is that PS2 generation. Going from the fifth generation, again, PS1 to six, PS2, there was a 43% jump growth in terms of consoles sold. And there were less consoles on the market between those generations, right?
Yeah.
Jaguar and 3DO, Saturn gone, Dreamcast didn't last long. And I think that giant boost there is because of DVDs, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
PlayStation 2 was sold at such a reasonable price. You were able to go and say, hey, it's not just for gaming. Families can get this to watch a lot of movies. And between that and the seventh generation, there was still an increase, but it was by 30%. So a little bit less. And then to the eighth generation, it dropped to an 18% increase. So it's still growing, but
Growing.
it's slowing down still, right?
Mhm.
And my only factor that I could think of there is this is the implementation of internet and digital technologies, right?
Okay.
People are now streaming on their phones, people are now streaming on their televisions or their computers. They're now watching, they're not using physical media anymore. And gaming transformed as well, right? PC gaming took off tremendously with the
Yeah.
advent of Steam. Mobile gaming took off. So that consumer gamer that was huge for a lot of those earlier generations, it's growing, but they're not just playing via consoles. So I don't know. To me, I see this, and I think it matters a lot with what you say all the time too about cloud gaming, right? Cloud
Yeah.
gaming isn't the future for everyone. Consoles are still growing, but that rate is slowing down compared to how big gaming is getting everywhere else. And I just saw Samsung now is introducing a cloud gaming service too, so where you
Mhm.
can play console games without the consoles now through Samsung. I haven't looked
Yeah.
into it. But it's just an interesting phenomenon. I would have to spend a lot of time looking into the data harder to say, hey, here's exactly what happened. But I do think it is that change in how we consume entertainment media. It's no longer physical, it's now digital, and it's now everywhere.
Yeah, because maybe you haven't even seen like breaking news really over the last month has been like Walmart is announced like we're going to stop physical sales of video games. Best Buy announced that we're going to stop physical sales of video games. And so more and more the physical sales of video games have been lessened. And that also starts to set up the question is that will the next generation, which we would hypothetically assume it starts in 2028 based off of the Microsoft document leaks, if it starts in 2028, is that an all digital generation? Is it like, yep, physical media or do they come out with an attachment, like a disk drive attachment for and then imagine how awful that would be though if stores aren't selling physical media. You either have to go to the like really niche stores to be able to get it. Will that end up converting the remaining holdouts on physical media, or will they live up to their threats of if that happens, I'm never playing video games again? What do you think?
Man, as much as people say that, it's not going to happen. They're going to keep buying games, right? I mean, it's a hobby. For some people, it might be close to an addiction, and because of that, it's just not going to stop. And
He's talking to me. This is an intervention.
It's me too. I buy physical games all the time that I look at. I'm like, I might not play that. And digital games is so appealing because it's like I don't have to get off my couch to put a new disc in too. So it is interesting. Even some of the rumors around the next Nintendo console there was speculation that, hey, there might be a physical and a digital version only as well, which really surprises me. But Nintendo's always a few generations behind in terms of taking certain types of leaps in how they present their consoles. And if they're considering it, possibly that is maybe a real sign of what's to come. And, yeah.
So for me though, like I remember even on the Xbox One really shifting into that all digital purchasing of the games, and that just carried easily into the Xbox Series generation because Microsoft had this backwards compatibility. That respect in and of itself says, great, I'm going to keep going. Do you think the Switch 2 will follow suit and respect people's digital libraries, or will Nintendo be Nintendo and just say, screw you all, you've got to like, nope, this is Switch 2 forward? I would even, and this is going to be horrible, and I know the internet will hate me for this thought, is that like I would even, because it's Nintendo and I'm such a fanboy for that company, and it's a love-hate relationship that I have with myself and Nintendo, but I would even be like, all right, just charge me a fee to unlock this game on the Switch 2 operating system. But if they do not give me a way to play my Switch games, that I think will break me. That will be like a real big hurt. What do you think?
It would hurt me too, and I'm a big Nintendo fan as well, just in terms of their approach to design and their philosophy about games. So I've read a lot about this, and I think some important things to consider is, Phil Spencer said we lost the worst generation to lose with that Xbox One PS4 generation because people built their digital libraries then, and that digital library isn't something you could physically carry over or go back to really unless you keep that console on. So PS4 going to PS5, people were going to be a little bit more loyal to that. But if you were an Xbox guy, you're going to be more loyal to the Series X, Series S. Nintendo, in terms of a core competency, their strength wasn't ever really in internet or account administrative technologies. They were a gaming company. They were a toy company. And I know the current president of North America has confirmed that, hey, what we've now done with the Switch, we've gotten rid of all the Nintendo IDs that was on the Wii, the Wii U, the 3DS and all that. We now have a standardized account platform we plan on carrying over. To me, that says, hey, they're looking at the 1 billion plus software units sold on the Switch, which is the most ever for a Nintendo console. Yeah. And they're saying, this is an easy win for us to just allow you to bring it over. Now, if you have the account system in place, that tells me that that's part of it. The next part is backwards compatibility. And if they still go with the NVIDIA system on a chip, but it seems like they are, there's a couple ways they could do it. They could emulate with that new chip in ways, or they could take the original Switch chip like they've done in past backwards compatible systems and just place that in the new Switch as well to give a more natural way to play it. That hasn't been confirmed yet, but my money would be that there is going to be some type of backwards compatibility support depending on what the new console itself can do, right? Joy-Cons, there's not even full support across the Switch units. If you have a Switch Lite, there's certain main Switch games you can't play just because there's no Joy-Cons, right? So there might be some natural caveats to that, but I'll say this, I think Nintendo would be very, very stupid to not have backwards compatibility on what they've done with the Switch.
Yes. Oh, it would hurt me so deeply because then all of a sudden it's like now I have to have because that's always the thing that annoyed me about any kind of console generation shift was okay, well I got to maintain this because my friends are all over here and that is a whole new friends list. And I thought Xbox handled the transition to this generation the best, but PlayStation had the victory from PS4 carrying that easily into and kind of being able to flex that into this generation. What do you think then, just about kind of what we've seen with the Switch 2 rumors so far? Like, do you feel like this is going to, like, the thing I want to see from Nintendo, I guess to answer my own question, because we were talking about cloud earlier, and then I want to jump into some of the comments that I see popping up here in chat. One of the things I would love to see is a cloud edition of Switch where I can just like fire up a browser, fire up my Switch game, and that's it. Like there's no extra step. And I would be happy to even pay for that kind of service as a part of the Nintendo Online, but I don't think Nintendo has that within them technologically. And so there would have to be a partnership that you would have to see. And Doug Bowser, president of Especially America, talks about how they really view Microsoft as a partner. Like, what are your thoughts going in? Because the next couple of years are going to be crazy.
I think you're right. Nintendo would possibly be interested in doing something like that, but they also like to have control about how that experience is delivered since they have such a high standard on quality. Now, the great thing is that existing partnership with Microsoft has showed some weird, compatibility with like Xbox achievements, excuse me. Like I was playing Minecraft Dungeons on my Switch and I was getting Xbox achievements that popped up when I logged into my Xbox, which was really cool. So they're definitely open to exploring that. That was kind of Microsoft going to Nintendo versus Nintendo going to Microsoft. The other thing that I find interesting is with the new news about this live action Zelda film is they're going 50-50 with Sony on that. Sony's financing at 50%. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to lead to anything with Sony, but it at least opens the door to potential conversations depending on how that partnership goes as well. Nintendo would love to give you a low affordable version of any console they put out, right? Do they fully embrace cloud? Maybe, right? Japan, Asia Pacific markets, they're a lot more ahead of the game with 5G networks and all of that too. So it could be something they see as, something to explore with not the next generation, but maybe the generation after. But I do think you're right. Those aren't their strengths, right? They would need help from a Microsoft or a Sony for sure.
So Nebby Lincoln Chat says live action Zelda film has them wary. I was surprised by the live action announcement too. I was thinking animated in the style of Mario, and I think because that would be, I was like, I'm all about that. What are your thoughts?
I'm the same way. I love Zelda. It's my favorite franchise, and we're obviously going to have a conversation about Tears of the Kingdom here in a little bit too. I was just as weary, but I'm also trying to be charitable, right? They care about this property. Nintendo doesn't want to drop the ball. There's some interesting names associated to it. I think one of the writers did, I don't know if it was the director did Maze Runner and Planet of the Apes movies, one or the other. So there's some potential talent behind it. I personally think I would be wary about any Zelda movie unless it was being done by Studio Ghibli or Martin Scorsese. Like, if it wasn't one of those names, I would have the same sense of fear that I have right now for what could happen here. Yeah. So I don't know. I can't imagine it, what this could be, right? How do you do a live action Zelda film? I mean, in your mind, what do you think they would have to do to make that work?
Oh, it's going to have to be like you don't want to go gritty, but I think the special effects budget is going to have to be absolutely absurd. Like, obviously, like the characters are humanoid, so you're not going to have to sit here and do too much about that. But there's obviously some weird, designs and characters that they could put in. And I think you have to lean into, in a way, I like if they could go into it as a kind of a Lord of the Rings kind of style, with that kind of epic adventure, grounded in like, okay, these are real actors, but obviously in a fantasy world. If they go in that direction, I think that could work out really well, especially not just for one movie, but for creating a movie franchise.
Yeah.
That is pretty much everybody under the sun will go probably see it. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm curious too. Do you think they'd try to adapt a certain story from a game? And if so, what game do you think they would be most easy to adapt for that initial film?
Or of Time would be the only is the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Unless they want to do like Wind Waker and be like lots of sailing,
But
lots of
even then,
sailing.
Wind Waker has such a specific art, right? It
Yeah,
would almost, yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm
yeah.
I'm I'm cautiously optimistic. I'll stand that way until it comes out.
You think
So
Chris Pratt's going to be the voice of Link?
I don't know, man. He gets no, I don't think so. He's too busy with Garfield now, it seems like, and probably Mario. Sony being attached to it, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Tom Holland was Link, just
Ooh,
because
yeah, that's a great idea.
the showrunners have a lot of experience with Tom Holland, and who knows, but I could see him being a Link.
Yeah, I think that could work out too, for sure. So on that note, though, I want to jump into a couple of the comments that we've seen as a part of what we talked about, and then let's get into the game of the year nominations. I like the name here: generic middle-aged white guy playing games. Man, it could describe us both. All he's missing from his name is who also has a beard. Says, sorry I'm late. I hope I didn't miss too much. Mobile has been money. Netflix games is super weird. Netflix has been stepping into gaming. We're seeing actually even with game streaming. We talked about like Samsung stepping into game streaming and cloud streaming. It's going to be like a competition of services rather than hardware going forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I saw they're bringing maybe Hades here soon now too.
Mhm.
So there's two sides to it, right? As one person enters the market, like a Netflix or maybe even an Amazon Prime, which Amazon definitely has more strengths to do something like this. Other people are going to want to compete. Netflix has such loyalty where I could see them having some success, but I don't know if it's long term, right? Because to me, I'm never going to probably go to Netflix to game there unless there was something that was exclusive there that was extremely revolutionary, right? But again, I just think it's a testament to what you've said that, hey, we're getting away from the consoles in terms of gaming. There's going to be more and more cloud gaming, more and more internet gaming, games in more places, which I probably will be a little bit confusing at first, but eventually will shake out and there'll be some consistent leaders in those spaces.
Excellent. And then Generic goes on to say physical games are usually now a code in the box anyway, especially for PC games. Rip owning video games. This is back to the fact that companies are moving out of that physical. Do you think that they'll still have sections for video games that are just selling you the code?
I think a lot of games and a lot of game makers want to go that way. Was it God of War Ragnarok that leaked a little bit early ahead of Street Date? And I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Who's
I think it's a lot of these games, they kind of leak out early and a couple of content creators get a hold of them. And then there's a whole thing on the internet going like, watch out for spoilers. The game's out.
Yeah. And because of that reason alone, I forget the director's name for God of War Ragnarok. He's well known. But I remember him even tweeting something like, I don't like this idea, but this is one of the reasons why just putting a download code in a box or just a disc that is just an activation key is enticing because you can avoid a lot of this. And from a game creator perspective, I get that you want to have control about how people experience your creation a certain way. So yeah, I mean, it can happen for sure, unfortunately, but that does beg the question: what happens to all your discs then once the internet ends, or are you going to be able to game when there's no more power? I don't know.
All right. Bollock says, I've been buying games on Steam for years now, and I have way more than I actually played. What bothers me, though, is that Steam could just fold up shop and taking all of their games with them. I do think the probability of that would be very, very low because any Microsoft, Amazon, Sony, any big company would be like, oh, Steam's closing down. Well, here's the check. And now it's not. Because of the just the volume of people and games that are there. But what do you think about especially game preservation when we talk about an all digital and cloud world?
Yeah, it becomes harder, right? If you don't have a physical way to just always access something and turn it on, then you're dependent on a lot of other service providers to always be there. And just realistically, how history goes, that's not going to be the case, right? So Steam is extremely successful. They have tons of money and capital. I can't see them failing on their own. But yeah, it's a legitimate concern about what ownership actually means in general in today's world. I mean, what are your thoughts on that as well?
So it is a tough it's a line of trust, right? Because like I
Yeah.
trust that, Microsoft isn't gonna like become an evil, and say, hey, we're gonna start, like, you can now that license is only a 30-year license, and then if you want to keep your game. I do think that there is that, and I'm more concerned for like online games. Obviously, I just started stepping into Star Citizen, and I think the experience with that game is like, yes, this is an online game. If the servers are to go offline, Wayfinder right now finds itself, I think, in a little bit of trouble because Digital Foundry, or not Digital Foundry, like I forget their funding publisher, like had to do a lot of layoffs. That's been going throughout the industry, and they've been impacted by it. So it's like, wait a minute, this is an online game. I'm not so worried about like Steam or Xbox or like the single player games. It's the games that do require a server to be able to be played, even if you're cloud streaming it, and they, like you still have to physically fund that server. And so that's where I fall into that concern more than any kind of single player or like, purchasing a digital license.
Yeah, and we've seen certain fans of games that have gone that route or have gone and created their own server, right?
Mhm.
The question is there's legal aspects around that too. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I know some companies are more ready to jump on a legal lawsuit about that, but I do wonder if there needs to be a situation where you could say, legally speaking, hey, you're no longer supporting this product. You might own the IP, but there still needs to be some type of right that these people who bought the game from you have a
Yeah.
way to play it on their own if necessary.
Mhm.
Maybe it gets there as games as a service increases, as gaming continues to be a more and more important factor in just the economy in general as it grows and grows. But right now, that's definitely a tough point. Like, imagine a world without Fortnite. I can't, but there's going to be a day and
A
age where,
possibility. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and people are going to want to still play that. So,
And and you can't rely on the like altruism of gaming communities to support it with private servers, which ends up being kind of the process right now. I've even seen people working to recreate why am I drawing a blank? It's an old MMO. It ended up closing. It was released recently. I'm thinking like my mind just keeps going to Wayfinder, but man, oh my gosh, something set in the stars. It's kind of like based off the WoW team. If anybody in chat can assist here, it's like,
yeah, not sure
good
about that
lord,
one.
yeah, I failed. Like I was like, why? And that's probably part of the problem. In this case, all right. Back to the comments regarding Zelda. Zoela says, I think Twilight Princess would be a good choice. Neverlink agrees for the story theme. What do you think about Twilight Princess as being the theme for the movie?
I think it could work. It's a dark story in ways, but it's very grand. And I know Twilight Princess also went for that very realistic approach to its art. So I think they could easily emulate a lot of those costumes and just looks in general. Even if they don't go that route completely with the story, I could see it being a big inspiration for how they bring it to life in a live action film for sure.
Yeah. And then going into it, Yamron says, if he were still alive, Gilbert Gottfried would be an amazing voice actor for Link. He's normally a silent protagonist. Wouldn't that be? That would be the perfect April Fool's joke in
Yep.
my mind. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say if we have that, we have to go with Danny DeVito as Tinkle in the green spandex suit, and that's gonna be a blockbuster.
Oh, dude, instant hit, instant buy,
Yep.
for sure. And shout out to Winlord says, "Hi, I've just been watching my Star Citizen VODs, and I'm live. Nice, very much. Thanks for joining in, guys. Got lots to talk about left in today's show, so." Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. It's a good time to have kind of a call to action. Be sure to like, subscribe, and one of the great things that we've been able to clip these things up for you guys. So hopefully y'all are enjoying the just the shows and more. Be sure to, I'll also in the link in the description once the VOD is done, I'll be sure to have Mark's contact, his YouTube channel, and so much more, so you guys can go follow down that rabbit hole and check out the things that he's also doing. He's an excellent content creator. And so I thank you guys so much. Okay, I think it's time. I think we've covered the thoughts. We've covered what's going on currently in gaming. Now let's talk about Game of the Year nominations. Obviously, it was announced yesterday. I saw Twitter just goes off and does what Twitter does. Were you surprised? Were you shocked? Were you happy? Did you think anything got snubbed? What do you think?
I'm not surprised by anything. I mean, it's kind of almost predictable at this point. Starfield wasn't on there, was it, for Game of the Year?
Not for
I don't
Game of the Year. It was on there for RPG of the Year, and I don't think it has a shot at
Yeah.
winning RPG in the year because it's stepping into Baldur's Gate 3. the thing is that I'm perfectly fine with Starfield not being on the game of the year because the games outside like the Resident Evil 4 remakes on there, and that in and of itself is like, okay, like is that's more of a conversation as gaming and gaming culture goes, is like, is that something we're okay with? Like, I don't want to sit here and dictate that to anybody. Like,
Yeah.
if people are like, yeah, it's a great game, it's like, cool, then it definitely, the people worked on it now. It's not like they just like remastered. It's not a remaster,
Yeah.
it's a remake. So it's like, okay, let's I'm game for having that debate and discussion. But the thing that I think for me that I was like really shocked by was that Starfield was not on there for music. Or audio. I thought the sound design and more in Starfield was really great, especially the music. I felt like it really was fantastic, and it missing on that was like, okay, like, it makes me also want to make sure I go check out those other games because being seventh place isn't bad.
Sure.
If I ever am lucky enough to release a video game and it makes it at number 7, which is not listed, in the consideration for any game of the year nomination, I accept. It's like, thank you.
Yeah. Starfield's audio is the first thing that caught me whenever I started that game up. Just the sound that emerges at the boot up screen. It was captivating. It set the tone for the grand fantasy you're going to go on. Looking at audio design, Alan Wake 2, Dead Space. Dead Space surprises me. The Dead Space remake is fantastic, but I just think if you're going to consider that, Starfield had to be close to it as well. And Resident Evil 4 being on there too. Again, it's done well, but there is that question, like you said, and I know there are a lot of people in the gaming space that are adamant that, hey, remakes, even if they're truly brand new remakes, right? Should they be on there or not? And that's debated every year. And I think the answer is it's probably going to stay that way, but it is interesting when it does give up to like snubs to something like a Starfield as well, which again, Dead Space and Resident Evil 4, great remakes. They make me appreciate the games more, but yeah, it's a tough one. We're not going to solve it here. Although if they want to give us the power, I'm happy to do that.
We'll fix it all right here, guys.
Yep.
And the internet and everybody will be in consensus. We've got
Of course.
it. We've managed it. This video game podcast has solved the problems. Mystera says, get Mario off of the list. What do you think? Because I'm very curious.
Yeah, no, I would disagree, but I would be curious to hear his opinion. Super Mario Wonder, I mean, everyone thinks Nintendo is always up there, right? When they release a new IP, they always have games up there. They call it the Nintendo, not Nintendo bias, but just I forget what it's called. But I think that's for a reason, honestly, because they know what to do. And Super Mario Brothers Wonder is, I'll say this, the best 2D Mario game I've played since Super Mario World. And I think World might be one of the most perfectly designed games of all time, too. So for that, I don't think you can snub it simply for how important Mario has been to gaming, right? I mean, without Mario Brothers, what other franchise would have captivated and catapulted gaming in the 80s onward like it has? So
yeah, so I'm actually perfectly fine that Mario is on the list. And one of the things I've been juggling, as we kind of round out this year is is it going to be Starfield for me? Because when playing through Starfield, I was like, yeah, this is my personal game of the year. Like, this is the game that I'm just like, wow, I really enjoyed this. I have my complaints about like the multiverse fatigue that, but it makes sense within the new game plus. But overall, the story, I'm like, a multiverse to me just makes every choice mean less. There's less impact. Oh, they died in this universe, but they're still alive in a million infinity, universes out there. Great. But I was like, well, I was saying I hold a reservation for Super Mario Wonder.
Yeah.
And when we talk about Wonder, we talk about the music. We talk about the level of animation that they went through. And I saw some comparisons to the new Super Mario Brothers. Get that crap out of here. And I was such a Mario fan, so obviously biased, but I was just over like consuming the new Super Marios and at the same time grumbling like, why Nintendo did you call it the new Super Mario Brothers? Because it's now 20 years old. Like, it's my whole, I have a whole stand-up bit about like the Old Testament. Like, what a flex, what a word to just label like, hey, here's your scriptures. They're the old scriptures, but you got to hit this New Testament, man. Anyway. I'm in a mood. But yeah, with that, like you see those animations, you see the style, and then yes, it automatically starts to make me feel like this is a true sequel to Super Mario World
Yeah.
that is then just beautiful. And so obviously biased because it got the kids, we're playing it a bunch, and that just means like it's a game, especially like I can play Starfield around the kids. Like I wasn't doing the story stuff, but just the general gameplay, shooting alien, monsters and running around planets is like not too horrible. But Super Mario is like it's on. It's family game night. We're playing Mario. We're all like doing different things, and you can play it multiplayer or you can still play it single player. They actually do it. An interesting thing about with online where you're playing with these ghosts that can help you out.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and that's completely optional. And it's very, very interesting. And then they have the cast of characters. One thing I would have loved to seen though, is that it's great that Yoshi, I almost said Yoshi P. It's great that Yoshi is a playable character. It would have still been cool to find him as a rideable mount in the game that then unlocked different kinds of exits. That's something that I really appreciated about Super Mario World. And what I'm looking to see with wonder over the course of time is it a game that I keep returning to and just playing through the hardest levels and just trying to find all the different secrets? The same thing, because it's still like I go back to Super Mario World every 5 years at least to sit down and just like, oh, I'm going to go to Star Road and I'm going to unlock all this stuff and all this weird muscle memory that still exists as a 40-year-old gamer. I'm like, all right, got it. I don't even need those blocks to unlock. I can use the cape and do all these things. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, to your point about being able to play the game with anyone, and the attention to detail is mind blowing. Just all the small animations from Mario going into a tube and grabbing his cap, to the face of the Goomba whenever you're about to jump on him, like he's just terrified, like he knows he messed up. It's a love letter to the franchise, and it is such a great direction compared to where new was, because it wasn't new anymore, right? It was rote. It didn't feel like it had the same exploration appeal of the original games, especially World. And I think when they removed the time countdown for Wonder, that was such a huge deal to just say, hey, explore at your own pace. And again, to me, I think, we tend to experience the most joy when we do things with other people. And the fact that Wonder is a game that not only can you do that when you're online with random people and like actually have weird, genuine interactions, like, hey, thanks for saving me from that fire, I'm an idiot. But just being able to play with family and friends, like that's a special testament to how good the game is. And I think that is enough credence to why it's on the list too. Again, also partial to him being Italian, just because, but
yeah, it's always funny because the people like look at me and don't realize I'm Italian as well. And it's like, that's also made it fun to be a stand-up comedian, because it's like, I can be like when Cuomo got in trouble, it's like, I get it. I get it. Like, okay, yeah, he's Italian. It's like, that's not an excuse. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, it's funny because I married an Irish girl. And if anybody knows like the Irish, at least from my experience, it's like they're not really a touchy-feely kind of bunch, but it's like with me and the Italians, it's like, yay, like embracing and kissing and hugging and stuff like that. So
that's a big story here too. My family's mostly Italian, and then my aunt married an Irish, and so there's a lot of Italians, Irish. And I think the first time my wife came over to my uncle's house, she was surprised because it's very normal, but like, hi, nice to meet you, kiss on the cheek, right? And to some people that could be shocking, but I'm like, didn't you grow up just kissing each other on the cheek? Like, just like that's the kiss of peace. That's a normal historical thing. But when that Cuomo news broke too, my wife looked at me and she goes, no, I get it. And but
oh man, crazy times now. I'm working on a whole like bit about that, as I've been cursed by the Louis CK, like touch. And I stand out with all the other blonde wives that married into the family. We got the Montalbantos and the Pucciarellis. It's like, so I got to work on my Italian accent, because one of the things people always kind of point out, they're like, you don't sound like you have a Texas accent. I go, really? Like, I hear it. I like it from time to time, especially if I get tired or drunk.
Yep.
But it's like, all right, yeah, I guess I have a normal American style accent. And that's one of the things I've been trying to work on with my routine is to get comfortable with doing impressions and voices. So
Sure.
I pulled that band-aid off last night and did a whole Harry Carey sketch
Okay.
at the comedy club. And I think it went over really well. So we'll have to see
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
case. All right. Obviously there's still like so much to talk about. I think we're both in agreement. Mario absolutely takes the cake.
Yeah.
I think if I was going to vote, like I'm assuming you'd go for Zelda. Like I think you think Zelda takes it.
I did. And once I saw the announcement, I was like, I'm voting for Zelda for everything I can. And again, I know that might not be the popular choice among everyone, but I'm so impressed with what they did with Tears of the Kingdom. Even again, for those who haven't beaten, and I won't spoil it completely, but one of the best endings in a Zelda game. Like one of those, I'm like if a game leaves you with like your kind of heart pounding in the chest a little bit, and you're like, wow, that was fantastic. You want to tell people who aren't even gamers, that to me tells you it was a good Spider-Man 2018 did that for me as well. The ending of that game. So yeah, I think it's my personal favorite. But when I look at the list, I'd probably say I will be surprised if Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't win. Even though that's not a game for me, I can look at it objectively and say, I get it. I get why people are excited about that. So I think there's some tough competition this year for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, in a way, and it's not that I'm an anti-Zelda fan because I love Zelda. I grew up with it. I haven't played through Tears of the Kingdom yet
Okay.
because I was like, I'm gonna wait for the Switch 2. That's like honestly, I was like, well, if the Switch 2 can run this game and run it like at
Yeah.
60 frames a second, like that's the experience that I want. But my wife keeps like I might end up buying it for her for Christmas
Okay.
on her Switch. But so I'm sitting here, yeah, like, yep, just gonna try to find some time. However, I do feel like there is a Nintendo bias, especially when it comes to the Game Awards. And yes, they do execute, but man, I kind of think that it's like if Zelda takes it over, Baldur's Gate 3,
Yeah.
it just I think it just calls them more in my view is that I think then you're going to see a bigger narrative push of that this is a paid for and bought awards. It's not a true reflection of X, Y, or Z. Do you feel like that could be anywhere near the reality of what we would see?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the Game Awards themselves it's got to be financed by gaming companies and partners in that industry. So I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if it's just that is the case. But I know I honestly don't know how the voting completely works. Like if our votes count as much as other people in the industry too. Um, I will say this about Tears of the Kingdom. If they make a sequel to it or another entry in the 3D franchise that is just more of that,
Mhm.
then I will say, okay, it's hitting its limits on what that, in terms of what you can get out of that specific formula and design. But I do think, and Breath of the Wild won in 2017, right? So to me, again, I was skeptical with Tears. I was like, how can they do more if it's going to be so similar? But the first 10 hours, I was like, oh, I get it. Like this, I get it. Like they somehow made Breath of the Wild in ways feel like a demo for what Tears was eventually going to be.
Yes. Yeah.
And so like I'm sure there will be that argument depending on who wins, right? But at the end of the day, I could see it both ways. And again, I'm Baldur's Gate 3 again, not a game for me, but I
Mhm.
could see why people will vote for that and go that route and say that it's game of the year. And I'm fine with that too. So
I think, and Sonia says Final Fantasy 16 is awesome, and I'm enjoying playing this 16. I haven't finished it, and my hope is that I will be able to do that before December. I'm assuming I'm going to get some more gaming time with Thanksgiving holiday and what have you. But I don't know. I don't know technically where I'm at in the story, and I'm
yeah,
not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't played it yet. So I feel like I'm making decent progress, and I'm looking forward to seeing ultimately how that game shakes out. But I do say that I was wrong about Final Fantasy 16. I thought going into this year with Yoshi P and the team. That I thought Final Fantasy 16 was an absolute game of the year, and it really isn't. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. I think the biggest miss, because I know a lot of people focusing on the battle system and being more in action, and it's like honestly, I have no issue with that. I still want to see the Gambit system return. I
okay,
wanted to see the Gambit system in Final Fantasy 15 because I
yeah,
think that would be something that would add into the strategic planning
sure,
of fights. You're like, okay, I want you're in my party, and I want you to kind of focus in on this because this is I want to play this character in this way. So that's one thing that I wish and have wished for a while, that it wasn't in it. And again, that was a fine design decision, but the
Sure.
limitation on just putting it on PS5, I think is really more that it soured the water so much. It made it a whole console thing. Same thing with these exclusives, and that kind of ties back into the where we kicked today's show off with console. Hey, what's going on with the console sales? That they are slowing down. What does that mean? They're growing, but it's the velocity of which they're growing has definitely slowed.
Yeah.
When it comes to 16 just being on PS5, I understand why Yoshi P said what he said. I understand Sony's paid for that, both with man hours to make it work and more. But I think that in and of itself is the biggest miss, because it's like, hey, imagine if Endgame came out and we're going to say only people on the East and West Coast can see it. Everybody in Central America, throughout this time zone, you're going to have to wait a year. That would be all of a sudden you're going to get spoiled. It's going to get ruined for you. And it's just not right. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I see why. I know why developers choose that route, right? Because it is a time and a money thing. And when you're developing for one console, it's a lot easier to perfect that game for that one console. Kind of related to it, Baldur's Gate 3 didn't come out on Series S at first, and there was the argument well, the Series S is holding back this generation. And I kind of personally would push back on that, because it's they develop games for multiple consoles for PC all the time, because they're developing for different tiers of PCs. And I just saw that now that they've got Baldur's Gate 3 working on Series S, they found something in how they program the game that's going to improve memory utilization by 30% across the board for play. So
everybody benefits.
Yeah. And so that's something that takes time to figure out, right? And so depending on where Square was internally in terms of getting ready, I get why they made that choice. But yeah, unequivocally, it hurts it for sure. Spider-Man 2 as well. I mean, even games like Tears of the Kingdom, there's so many things to trade off about how you want to present your game, but there's still the idea of, is it better for our console and our brand if we keep it here too? And I think Square's a little bit different than some of those other franchises I also just mentioned. I think they benefit. That IP is enjoyed everywhere already, right? On PC, on Xbox, so Nintendo Switch too. So I think they would benefit more for sure by being more places.
So I guess the final form of controversy that we kind of saw after yesterday, Starfield, and I saw Star Flop and Star Failed trending, which was fun. But the other one was Hogwarts Legacy. And that's a game that came out and just had insane sales, a lot of really good critical reviews. Obviously, controversy surrounding not J.R. Tolkien, J.K. Rowling. Thank you. We've just been sitting down reading the books with the kids, so it's I've never read the books before, so it's been a fun treat. But do you feel like with Hogwarts, any kind of controversy surrounding the game is one of the reasons why it's not on any category? It's not even, there's other games there where you're like, this isn't even from an indie studio and it's indie game and nominated for indie game. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I remember it was the talk of early 2023. My brother-in-law said people are saying it might be one of the best games of all time. I personally didn't play it. It's the first game my wife ever played because she just read the books and loved it, listened to the books. And she was enjoying it, but she stopped. And I haven't played it yet either, so I can't really speak to it. When I look at these other games, I guess I can see the argument both ways. In terms of the controversy, I mean, that could definitely be a factor too, but it didn't pop off at me as well, just because honestly, with how good gaming has been in 2023, it personally wasn't a high one for me as well, right? There have been so many other games.
I haven't made time for it, right? So it's there's just been so many other games that I'm drawn into. But I decided I did purchase it, and I haven't, but I just I have an addiction, and this is what we call an intervention. I get it.
My name is Brian.
My name is Brian. I spend money on games that I don't have time to play. Please keep me in your prayers. So that's where it's but from what I've seen, people have said it, and so I actually echo what you're saying. Is that this was an incredible year for video games? It's no matter what games got snubbed, and that's when it comes down to it. Everybody has a favorite Pokemon.
Yep.
And whenever Nintendo's like, yep, not all the Pokemon are going to be in it, somebody's getting snubbed because there is a list, a number that is limited. And I do think though that from a sales perspective, like, I don't know, I'm just like, they won because like they made insane amounts of money. I know that means that there'll be future Hogwarts games, and if the team can continue to deliver on that, because the game director said, basically about the controversy is like, I just got to make a good game. Like, if I make a good game and people have fun playing with it, like that's really all the gamers really want at the end of the day, and all the rest of it just is online stuff for online attention. So that's just going to be how it goes.
Yeah, the internet's always full of the most reasonable discourse for sure. So yeah,
the most calm and genius of minds float to the top of the algorithm
all the time. Yeah, I mean, talking about 2023 in terms of gaming and being one of the best years, I've been trying to keep up with Metacritic data from 96 to this year in terms of games that are 90 or above. And based on my most recent update, I could be missing some things. It currently stands tied for sixth in terms of in sixth place in terms of most games with a 90 or above, with 28 total right now. And that does include historically if a game like Red Dead released on multiple consoles and got 90s on multiple consoles too. But that's saying between, since I was a kid till now, this is possibly the sixth best year in gaming. So again, keeping that in mind, I get why there maybe are some snubs that are surprising. So
now, Chili says in chat, and this is actually something we've seen in movies when it comes to the movie of the year, the Oscars nominations. Chili says, I will say, if you want a shot at game of the year, never release in Q1 or Q2. The newest games will always have the highest chance of being voted because it's the newest games releases. And that's the same thing that Hollywood does. Like they wait for all their Oscar contenders for a specific season, because if you release a movie earlier on, it's easy. It's kind of like, oh, what have you done for me lately? And I totally agree with that. Like, and I don't want to see games shift their schedules around in a way to try and target like award season. We've seen, I thought this happened even with Jedi, the first Jedi Survivor. Like it was like, everybody was really like loving it, but it came out like a week or two because it ended up having a delay or something. It came out after the nomination period to be considered for that year, and then it was just easily forgotten in the next year. So like there clearly is a human element to this process.
Yeah, again, I don't know if it's solely based on, we got to plan it right for Game Awards, because I think at the end of the day, a company's like, yeah, we got a Game Award. That's awesome. We kill most about sales. I think realistically, post-holiday season, there's a little bit of a chance that you're going to get less games purchased, right? You bought a lot of stuff already. So I think they probably focus on best times to release games in terms of, highest optimal sales as well. And there just might be some overlap with that recency bias. You're right, because like, again, my first look at this yesterday, I wasn't like, where's Harry Potter? I haven't thought about that game in months. Yeah. So
very neat. Very neat. All right. So like outside of, we've talked about like Mario, Starfield, the nominations, obviously you're pulling for Zelda. I would love to see Mario take it, because I'm still a little bit bitter about how Zelda beat out Mario Odyssey. And I can't, I don't like, I think given time, we can clearly see that was a mistake. I don't know. Do you agree or disagree?
I'm such a Zelda fan that I think it's one of those. It sucks that they came out in the both year, but they're both fantastic games. And if you're going to crown one, I'm not upset that it's Breath of the Wild personally. But again, if you want to say should have been Odyssey, I can hear that out too. But again, 2017, great year for gaming. Like again, the Switch's library in general. If this is the last year and that was the first year, think about just the stellar end caps they're having to this console generation. So, yeah, I mean, that again, I'm Zelda. I'm a big fan. So
I'd love to hear from chat though, like on that, because that's one of the things that comes up when I was talking with David Jaffe about this kind of same concept. In fact, him and I are going to collab as a special kind of thing this coming Thursday. So if you guys are, want to talk, we'll talk about more Game of the Awards, etc. But we talk about like historically, like when you look back, like here's the game of the year, but then once like 5 years have passed, sometimes that value can change, and you're like, well, yeah, that was what I was excited about because of hype, But then realistically, I look back and I'm like, oh, we're all still playing this one game. We're all still, like this in and of itself, had way more legs. And that's something that can only be judged with time. And that's where I come up with Odyssey. I was like, I thought it should have won, but now I'm like, it definitely was snubbed by that, especially with Tears of the Kingdom, where people are like, oh, the first one was like Breath of the Wild was like a demo for Tears of the Kingdom. It was like the training wheels, and then Tears of the Kingdom like just launches it off from there, which does make me think that if there was going to be a winner, it would be Tears of the Kingdom over Mario Wonder, because of what Tears is doing. But my goodness, I think, you and me will have to have our Mario and Zelda fight like every 5 years whenever they release one of those games.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
I'm fine with either way. An Italian might win, and I'm okay. So
yes, and in every situation, an Italian is victorious, and and especially if that Italian's named Mario.
Oh man.
I Am Prout says, do Game Awards wins translate into sales like it does within Hollywood?
I mean, they put it on the product, right? They put it on the product packaging if they do a new SKU. And that probably matters a lot to parents maybe looking for games for kids more than it does for you or I or other gamers out there who are just connected to the scene. But it probably gives it a little bit of a bump, I would say. I don't know how huge it is, but some games you might not have heard of, like Dave the Diver. It's been on my radar for a bit, but seeing that it's nominated for a lot of awards, I'm like, maybe I should try that out on my Switch, so.
That's really good. That's really good. And one of the things that was called back from earlier, like I do think it actually translates into sales.
Yeah.
And so that's where, because they can slap Game of the Year on the label, and then you can, it gets bundled. And so I think having those kind of prestiges does help. I don't know if there's any kind of tracking number or metric behind it. I don't know if it also would help something like Zelda sell more, right? Like, I think there is a diminishing return. So something like an indie game or a game that maybe you're like wasn't on your radar, that could help push it over the edge for you. But for something you're like, I already bought Zelda. Like, it doesn't sell. I don't go out and buy another copy of Zelda. Where it's like a movie, you could be like, oh yeah, I watched that. Oh, I'm gonna watch that again. You know, like I could see how that could have a repeated, like, financial, like, re-up. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's only so much you can squeeze when you have a huge IP like a Tears of the Kingdom or a Mario Brothers versus, again, some up and comer company that you might not have heard of, but might be the real truly innovative release out there as well. So to your point about going, like, it's an interesting question you bring up about going back to like what are the games we still play. I think about Starfield with that, because Starfield's going to keep getting worked on. It's going to keep getting patches. There's going to be more and more mods. Starfield's probably
play Starfield. Like, I was sitting here, I was like just booting it up a little bit this week. Going to play some more this week. Very, like, right now it's more in a casual perspective because I was moving forward on on like, actually, like, I want to finish the story. Now that has been done, I'm like, yes, like, this is great. Like, yeah, I'm going to keep going back to it. In fact, they got new updates rolling out. I almost installed the beta to test out the DLSS updates. And I was like, oh, I'll wait, but it's like, and then there's DLC and mods. And it's like, this is like one of those games where it's like, people are like, oh, trying to meme on it, like Game of the Generation. It's like, I will be surprised, and I will admit that I'm wrong if this ends up panning out. But if we're still playing Starfield in 5 years, like, yes, that is exactly what we mean by this. This is a game that just continues on. But
I'd be surprised too, because I think that's just the norm for Bethesda games, right? Bethesda games have that long attraction to them.
Yeah.
So,
and thank you so much, Chili, for the $2 super chat. Says, if you're new here, maybe hit that subscribe button and like. So appreciate that, the support here on the channel. And also just kind of a callback earlier where I was drawing a blank. WildStar is the name of that MMO that they're like, it's going, people are working on it in the private server capacity. Same thing with man, drawing blanks. There's another MMO that I played, Reckoning, Warhammer Online. There it is. I at least got that one. So thank you so much for the support, Chili, and thank you guys so much for being here. There is any, like, this is pretty much we got 1 more minute left for the scheduled show before, like, I know I go back to work, you go back to work. That's what we do. Like talking about games, and we like providing for our families. We're men. You got any final thoughts before we wrap up? Where can people find you?
So you can find me over on YouTube and Twitch and TikTok at Joyful's Arcade. I know you said you'll post a link below. I mentioned this the last time I was on as well. I'm also co-founder and producer over at Devour Games as well. So if you follow my profiles, you'll find a link to that as well. We've been making games. Well, made a game a few years ago, working on games, contracted out to do other games as well. And one exciting thing, I don't know if I've told you this yet, Brian. I've been lucky to work with some very talented and connected people in the esports world. And a few months ago, probably about 6 now, a lot of them got together and invited me in that hey, we feel like there's a gap in the collegiate esports world, specifically with fighting games. And so we started a new company called cfgc, Collegiate Fighting Game Conference, and we had our first beta tournament start last night with over 50 universities and 80 plus players doing Street Fighter Online. So we're hoping it's got some momentum, and at one of my many involvements in the gaming world as well. So it's cool to see that aspect of gaming, esports. I followed it adjacently beforehand, but now that I'm getting more involved, you can see such passionate ways gamers, going back to, are you still playing this game? Street Fighter 6 is going to be played for years and years and years, right? So that's up and coming. If there are any esports fans out there, any college folks out there that like to play fighting games, I'll have that on my bio as well to see, you could enter and participate.
Sweet, dude. I need to check that out. I need to get back into the fighting scene, because that's like fighting games and RPGs was like all I consumed. I was really big into that. Soul Calibur and like dominated my college year. Soul Calibur 2 and 3 and
fantastic games. Fantastic games.
And so I've been dying. I need to spend more time with Street Fighter 6, because that's one of the ones that is just like, yep. And that came out just like at this time of Diablo and Final Fantasy 16, and again, buying games that I don't have time to play. We'll have to get that resolved.
I think it's still on my shelf in wrapper.
There we go. Well, it's an intervention for both of us. As a final kind of subject, though, I thought this was a really good question. We didn't talk about it. 2024 most anticipated games. Prute wants to know. What do you think?
Gosh, that's a great question. My brain's blank right now on anything coming out on 2024. Realistically, I'm sure I have some. One game I'm still anticipating, it's supposed to come out this year, but it might not, is Warhammer Space Marine 2. That's a game that just looks awesome. But in terms of 2024, I'm just drawing a blank right now. What about you?
So I think when I start looking at it, like the two biggest games on the radar that shifted out of 2023 are Blue Protocol and Throne of Liberty. As especially like, again, I just kind of live into I love the multiplayer, online MMOs that just kind of keep drawing me back in. Star Citizen, I don't think it's coming out in 2024, but I definitely am like, that's going to be another game that I spend at least, at least a lot of time playing and experiencing and learning and kind of then following, because all of a sudden it's like, dude, it got its hooks in me good. But I think it's hard for me to pick between both of those. I've played Blue Protocol. I haven't yet played Throne of Liberty. And so I'm very kind of curious to see how the reception of it is. How do I enjoy playing it? The fact that it is controller support base in the base games natively makes it a lot easier. Crossplay. I know Blue Protocol, they're talking about crossplay, cross save, and it's launching on consoles. I've heard some kind of things where it's like, it's for Throne of Liberty, it might be that consoles have their own ecosystem, and I think that could ultimately hurt that game in the long run if that ends up being true. And then I start looking out over the rest of the year. There's I don't know if it was Towerborn, but there was a couple things that Microsoft announced that's kind of a part of that isn't like your big AAA, but I thought they did a really good job with Hi-Fi Rush, and I'd like to see kind of and I think that is a perfect thing for Game Pass. So I'm going to be interested in checking out some of those other games that they've got on the horizon, which is just really cool.
Yeah, Hi-Fi Rush I still need to check out. I've wanted to. Again, it's just finding time, and I feel like it's going to be one of those games I dive into and finish quickly, because it seems to be a pretty compact game. I just Googled it, and I forgot that we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth coming out next year.
Yeah,
which is huge. Star Wars Outlaws, which looks interesting. I'll say this. Here's my official pick right now that I'm looking forward to most: Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. It's a Metroidvania game, which I love. It looked really well done. So that's going to be out January, I think, too. So that's real soon. That's my most anticipated game.
See, and for me, like, that all depends on if I finish Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I have to start Final Fantasy VII Remake to finish it before I jump into Rebirth. So that is, there's a dependency here. I think of that from a software like, oh, we got a dependency. I got to get this knocked out before I can even consider. So I've avoided all the 7 Rebirth stuff, and because a trailer, I was like, shield my eyes, and go from there. But yeah, dude, it's gonna be, I think, a really excellent year. And at this point, like, I think I think we gotta get back to the grind. I
Yep.
thank you guys so much for taking some time to spend with us during the day. Again, go if you're watching this as a VOD, sound off in the comments as well. That's a great way of supporting these. And check out the links. I'll get them added, and you can go check out Mark's content on the internet as well. But without any further ado, I'm gonna let you guys have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see you guys in the next video, podcast, and or live stream.
Epic Loop Radio.